Hello and welcome, dear listeners, to episode 246 of Reformed Gamers, the show all about video games, fireworks, and all sorts of things. I am one of your hosts, Logan.
And I am his co-host, Micah.
Well, dear listeners, we missed it just by a week or so in regards to releasing episodes, but hope you all had a happy 4th of July. We're just talking about that in the pre-show, which if you are a Patreon supporter, you got to listen in on that. Maybe it stoked some fun memories for you. And so be sure to share those in the various places that TRG exists. Micah, we are, close to halfway through the year, man. And I just got to say, I'm going to bang this drum, repeat this phrase until the end of the year. What a time to be a gamer, man. It is insane.
I love it.
Just the amount of games we're getting, man. I mean, we're going to talk about one of the big ones that came out not too long ago, Final Fantasy XVI, which I'm curious.
You know, in like kind of the history of TRG podcast, you know, we have sort of these tentpole episodes where like, yeah, we're going to have a God of War episode, you know, or a Breath of the Wild episode or something like that. And like, I feel like every single episode this year is one of those episodes because we always have a big game. You know, we're either talking about, you know, whether it's Dead Space or Resident Evil or Tears of the Kingdom or Final Fantasy 16, like it's just so packed. So yeah, we've got just another big one today as far as that goes. We're going to be diving into our first impressions of Final Fantasy 16. So yeah, got a lot here.
Man. It's crazy, and I'm real curious about how that conversation is going to go. You know, typically as dear listeners, I don't really like to text Micah about, well, that sounds bad. I don't like to text Micah about like the games we're playing because I want to go into the conversations. I want to go into the episodes and be fresh. You know, I kind of want to see be a little surprised and bamboozled and him likewise. And so I think it's going to be a fun conversation. I'm looking forward to it. I'm seeing you take advantage of that game's photo mode, man. The bare bones photo mode, but I'm seeing you take advantage of it.
I tell you what, that photo mode is real garbo, but I'm trying my best.
Well, you're making it look good, man. I'm seeing some of the photos. There was one point I had to mute you on Twitter because I'm like, okay, crap, I know he's way ahead of me because I don't have that sword. So and then I blitzed through. I was like, okay, I'm checking the trophies. I'm ahead of him. Let's unmute Micah. Let's bring him back into the fold. Okay, we're good to go there. So that was funny, man. But yeah, dude, seriously, if none of y'all are following Micah on Twitter, you need to do that. He takes some really good shots, way better than what I do. But man, good stuff. Good stuff. Before we get into the show, a couple things to remind y'all of. Again, we are monetized on YouTube. So thank you again for your support for doing that. We just unlocked things like super thanks, super chats, memberships, and things like that as well. You're going to notice ads on our videos too. That helps bringing in a little bit of revenue for the episodes as well. So be sure to take advantage of all that fun stuff, if you will. I'm just saying, if you get a membership to the YouTube channel, you get some fun emotes. And I'm just saying, I might bring back the angry Mark Driscoll emote at some point. So I'm just saying, if you're a member of the channel, you can have access to those fun things. You can spam them in the live streams, which I've been doing on the YouTube channel as well. I've been playing through Trails of Cold Steel 2. We got like 12 episodes up there on the channel as well. You can go and watch. There's a whole playlist of them. Hoping to finish that game here pretty soon. So definitely be on the lookout for that as well. But yeah, again, thank you all for helping TRG reach that milestone. It's awesome to see. And it's nice opening up the YouTube analytics thing and seeing all the markers just solid green. I'm like, oh,
very cool.
Best it's ever been. But speaking of the best it's ever been, it's the best time to be a gamer because, man, we're playing a lot. And let's kind of get into it, Micah. Kick us off with TRG Kids. What have your kids been playing, man?
Yeah, several episodes ago, it's been a while now, but I talked about how my middle daughter, Ava May, who's about to be 10, we were going through the Kingdom Hearts series together, or at least the mainline games, not playing, you know, Dream Drop Distance in every Kingdom Hearts game. But we got back on the Kingdom Hearts 2 train, and we'd been off for a few weeks. But yeah, just picking up right where we left off, we just did the part where our heroes learn that, you know, I guess some spoilers for the Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2 real quick. I'll give you a few seconds if you want to bounce out or fast forward about 30 seconds. We just got to the part where our heroes learned that Ansem, you didn't really beat him in the first game, and like he's actually like Xemnas / Xehanort. And like all this weird goofiness that's just like this is where it starts going off the rails as far as the lore. Oh no, it had already been here a little bit. It
gets even worse.
But
He
yeah,
doesn't
this
even
is
care
where
anymore.
like for the mainline games, it's like, well, okay, hold on, what now? Uh,
Mhm.
so, so she's over there kind of looking at me like, "Daddy," like it's
I
okay.
I was about to ask, like, how are they responding to it? Because I've always been curious to like just kind of hear from people when they play these games, and it gets to this kind of really just zany part, like what
I
their
don't think
impressions
she
are.
cares too much because,
Okay,
and what I'm noticing is that, and the Kingdom Hearts games do a good job of having hooks for the very casual gamer and
okay,
person who doesn't really care for the story, and having hooks for the person who's very invested
yeah,
in the story. So whether you're the casual or the hardcore as far as the lore goes, there are story hooks to kind of keep you going along, I think.
yeah,
So the game kind of holds up. The combat and
sure,
stuff like is a little whatever, but it's of its era. But by and large, still a really fun game. So shout out to Kingdom Hearts, the whole franchise really. And then real briefly, just wanted to shout out last thing for TRG Kids. My son is still playing Rayman Legends, which is a classic. He's just kind of going back to that one, and everyone is still playing Tears of the Kingdom, which
right on.
it's been neat to just watch now that I've kind of beaten it and stepped away from the game, kind of
Hmm.
watch them continue to go forward and be like, oh, I'm seeing this now, I'm seeing this now, and like
Yeah,
they're doing things that I haven't done at all, and it's just fun to just kind of watch them.
yeah,
So, of course,
man.
game of the year, Tears of
Yeah,
the Kingdom,
dude.
right there.
I mean, I'm not going to talk about it on this episode, but I will shout it out here, man. I've been dipping in and out of Tears of the Kingdom since beating it, and
Okay.
golly, dude, just doing the side quests and things I miss. Just oh my goodness, dude, what a game! What a game!
Yeah.
Oh, so
I,
good.
I'm I'm curious to see how it kind of holds up over time and see if I'm
Yeah,
still feeling the same way about it, come December and January when we're talking about game of the year and things like that. But
yeah.
anyway, yeah, I'm,
Sorry,
I'm
real
sorry, you have
quick.
something else?
Have your kids made any crazy creations yet? Because I saw one today on TikTok. Someone made what's that thing in Star Wars called an AT-AT walker, the two-legged one
Yeah.
that would just go around Hyrule and just blow things up. I'm like, what? How did you people come up with this? This is crazy.
Not a lot of creations happening. I
Okay.
think I don't know. I was talking to my brother-in-law yesterday at the 4th of July thing. And I was like, when I get
Hmm.
back into Tears, I definitely want to like build something of my own. Like just create something fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not something I saw on the internet, something that I created.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, no, they're not doing a lot of
Okay.
creations.
Okay.
They're just, there's, I mean, what thread do you pull at in Tears of the Kingdom? There's so
There's a lot
many.
of them. Yeah. Understandable. Oh man.
Okay, moving on to what I've been playing. I've got a couple of games, and of course, we'll transition with Final Fantasy in a second.
Yeah.
Um, I I I got this game that it's been on my radar for PlayStation VR 2 for a little while. It's called Synapse, and it just came out yesterday, and I played it for about 2 hours today. It
Hmm.
is a first person roguelike shooter where you have like your right hand is like your pistol or your gun, and your left hand you do telekinesis. You can just lift objects and throw them around and things like that. So like imagine the game Control in VR and first person.
Oh. Okay.
Like as far as just the way combat is flowing, it's like, yeah, I'm gonna just like pick someone up and slam them on the ground, then pop off these other guys with my gun, and it's very kinetic and fluid, and you're encouraged to move fast. Again, it's a
Hmm.
roguelike, so you're going through these kind of stages. There's like 8 or 10 stages you have to kind of get through. I got past the halfway point for the first time right before we started recording tonight,
Okay.
and there was like a nice little kind of mini boss, or just boss, I guess, in the middle right there that you had to deal with. That was nice, but it's like, so you've got objects that you can lift up and push around, and like exploding barrels, of course, you can kind of toss around, but it's just so fun. Just like you can grab someone, pick them up, and just like shoot them in the air while you have them there,
Huh.
or like take them and then throw them into someone else, or just kind of take them and literally just like throw them over your shoulder. Like, just get out of my way and let me take on someone else. And then I'll come around and pop you as you're like getting up again, that kind of thing. It's
Yeah.
very,
I'm
very
watching
kinetic.
I'm watching the trailer now. This combat looks insane for VR.
I'm I'm really, really impressed with what I've seen so far. The movement and control is of a high caliber. It's better than the AAA PlayStation VR release game, Horizon Call of the Mountain. Like, it's much better than that game.
Sorry,
I,
this
di- I,
trailer. Oh my gosh. This is incredible.
Yeah, this is one of those games. Like it's sort of like Super Hot. It's not like
Yeah.
Super Hot, but as far as like this is a top 5, top 10 VR game.
Yeah.
If you have the headset, like you got to own this game. This is going to be one of those games. It'll
Man.
be if you watch, it'll probably stay on the PlayStation VR 2 like top 10 like sales charts or whatever that
Okay.
they have every month. I bet you'll see this game on there for like 5 years to come.
Wow.
It's insanely good.
Yeah, man.
It has David Hayter in it. He's a voice in it as well. If you're not sold yet, and that's awesome.
Oh, man.
And so, like I said, it's a roguelike. So you come back after you die and you get your upgrades. You're like, okay, and it's got really cool unlocks. You're like, all right, now I can pick up the grenades that they're throwing at me and toss those back. And now I can, I've got a shotgun, as a part of like the weapons it'll toss me and things like that. So, yeah, Synapse for it, right now it's only for PSVR 2. This will
That's
probably this will come to other platforms in
okay.
future, I'm sure, like kind of a 6-month
Mm,
exclusivity thing, I would
man.
imagine. But this game kind of knocked me off my socks today. Really, really well done. And I'm like running around, spinning, shooting, ducking,
Yeah,
taking cover, very kinetic, and not a hint of VR sickness, not
man.
even a little. And I have 0 comfort settings on, so that's a testament to the game
Wow.
as well.
Yeah,
It runs
man.
smoothly. It's some of my highest praise that I can give a VR game. I'll put it
Yeah.
that way.
Now you have this note in here. It says "in dreams." Was this made in dreams, or is
No, that's I'm glad you said it. 'Cause it's the developer. It's like the letter in
okay?
dreams. Yeah, that's the developer who created the game. So yeah, shout out to Synapse on PSVR 2. All right. I'm sorry, you had something else to
I
say
was
about
gonna
that?
say, just for some kind of the inside baseball sort of thing for our listeners, when Micah was writing this in the show notes, I was messing with him. So when he typed in VR2, I put Vito Reload 2 just to mess with him. And then he put like stop. So it was a good time. I thought the in dreams thing was you put that in there making fun of me, just trying to mess with me a little bit.
No,
But
no.
no,
I didn't want to forget the developer, so yeah,
yeah,
put that in there.
yeah. Shout out to
Okay.
them.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, Final Fantasy 16. Of course, that's the
Let's
big
get
boy.
it. Let's get it.
I've put the PlayStation says I've put in about 30 hours and I'm
Okay.
about 55-60% through the game, I think,
Mm-hmm.
if that is to be
Mm-hmm.
trusted.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what the PlayStation says. Okay, I've got a lot of different points to hit, and Logan, feel free for sure to jump in with any
Yeah.
thoughts, as we're doing this, because of course you've been playing a bunch as well. The first note that I have is this game is truly a spectacular game in the literal kind of definition of the word spectacular.
Mm-hmm.
It is a true spectacle with scenarios and events that are just unbelievable. Like you kind of like, what am I doing right now? What's happening on screen? I'm controlling this. Just
Yeah.
larger than life epic moments that are they're great. They're like it's why you play video games is for moments
Mm-hmm.
like this that they keep presenting over and over again. You can feel the budget in the game.
Especially in the opening hours, just that whole opening segment of the game and kind of where that leads and how it ends, and then you get the title card and it's like, oh my gosh,
Mm-hmm.
okay,
Yeah,
okay, buckle
has
up.
that long cold open, quote unquote,
Yeah,
until you see the title card. Yeah.
no, gets a little hot after a while if I want to throw that out
Oh,
there.
hey,
It's a
hey.
little hot, you know what I'm saying, a little spicy.
I think Logan, I think you can agree with this one. We might differ a little bit with our thoughts on this game a little bit, but I think we can agree on this point is that the soundtrack
Mm,
is
so good.
amazing. I think
Immaculate.
this is a 10 out of 10 soundtrack in my
Yeah,
opinion.
yeah,
It is among now again I'm only about halfway or so through the game, but in my opinion it is among the very best Final Fantasy soundtracks.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
right up there with them, if not better.
yeah.
It's yet to be seen.
There's real no debate about that soundtrack. When the music hits, the music fits perfectly for every little scene it appears in. It's
Mhm.
really really good. I was shocked.
Well, you had these epic moments, like I was kind of
Yeah.
describing at the front, with the full orchestra and the
Yes.
choirs doing their thing, and then
Mm-hmm.
you go down all the way down to
Mm-hmm.
the quaint town with a little acoustic guitar ditty,
Yep.
and it just feels so darn quaint, and
Yep.
it's just the best. So shout
There's
out to the I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, you mentioned the sound music. The way that music is used in games, if it's used effectively, it it hits perfectly in the way that it's intended to. You think of like the Resident Evil save room music. When you go into it, it has plays that soft piano music. You kind of relax a little bit, breathe a little bit, organize your inventory and kind of just relax a little bit because maybe you just ran through like 50 different zombies. Mr. X was chasing you. You got a liquor crawling on the wall. This game too, like when you get to, I don't think this is really a spoiler. When you get to like the place called the Hideaway, there's a certain music that it plays,
Right.
and I love just how I'm just like, oh my gosh, okay, we're good. We're good.
Mm-hmm.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
It's perfect.
Very cozy. The composer's name is Masayoshi Soken, who was the composer for Final Fantasy XIV, the online game.
That explains
And
it.
yeah, like a lot of this crew is the Final Fantasy XIV crew. And I think a lot of fans of that game were like, you guys get ready for this music because it's
Yeah.
about to blow your socks off. You guys don't know about Masayoshi yet, but
Yeah.
you're about to. And here we are.
So
as far as me, someone who didn't play 14,
mm-hmm.
I'm like, yeah, heck yeah, man. This guy has got some legit chops. So extra shout out to the score and the soundtrack. Graphics are outstanding. Coming off of Tears of the Kingdom, it is a little jarring as far as like you've got borders, you got walls, invisible walls all over the place,
right.
and it's kind of like, okay, yeah, it looks better, but is it more interactive? No. And that was a little jarring for me at first coming off of Tears, I think. But there's no denying that the graphics are just they're great.
Now I gotta ask about the graphics because I mean when you boot up the game, you can put it in two different types of modes. You have your graphics and performance.
Yeah.
Which one are you playing in?
I'm playing in performance mode.
Okay.
I understand that it is basically an unlocked 30 kind of thing. You're going to be swimming somewhere around 45 to 50, I think is what it is. Okay. And so it's variable, but my television has VRR, which helps smooth out a lot of that stuff. So I don't think I notice it as much as maybe some. But yeah, I'm playing on performance mode. How about you?
I put it on graphics mode because I'm like, okay, I want to go into this. I want it to look as best as it possibly can. And 30 frames per second. I'm like, that's kind of what movies are pretty close. That's what movies are. I think movies are like 29 or 20.
It's less than 30.
And I was like, let me go for the more cinematic approach. And I got to be honest, I don't really regret it. Game is run really good. It looks great. And I'm like, man,
these days I do bounce between the different modes and kind of play a few minutes in each one to check them out. I think Harry Potter and like Horizon Forbidden West had like 5, 6, 7 modes to check out. So I really do. I try them all out to see which one I think feels the best, has the right balance. And this is the one where I considered I might keep this on graphics mode, but I didn't. I just went back. I heard that the PlayStation 5 overheating thing was related to graphics mode.
Okay.
So I'm leaving it on performance just to. I know that's probably not that widespread as is reported, but
I think we were talking about that in the Discord server, and one of the major issues with that was like people were putting those like airflow attachments on the back of their systems, and that's what was causing it. And I'm like, why would you use that to begin with?
Yeah, I don't know about that. Well, anyway, I don't want to go down that rabbit trail. Sure. Back to the game. One thing that I love about this game is its focus on what they call icons, or the traditional summon spells of Final Fantasy. So like Ifrit and Shiva and Bahamut and all those kinds of things. That is a major focus both in the story and combat and all sorts of things. So I love that aspect of it. Logan, did you have any comments or thoughts there?
Just the designs of them. I mean, they nailed it. The scale of these things, nailed it. Just anytime they show up, man, it's a spectacle. I remember we're talking about Attack on Titan a little bit in the pre-show, and I remember the first time me and my wife watched it, and we saw the Titans show up like that. What was that? It's not the Steam Titan. It's the Colossal Titan. He shows up, right? He's looming over the town. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is insane. You see the Armor Titan for the first time. I'm like, that's insane. You see Aaron, do his thing. And you're like, that's even more insane. What is this show? You get the epic music. And man, just the hype I felt watching the first season of Attack on Titan. Same feeling I feel here when they show up. I'm like, dude, this is... Let's go, dude.
Yeah,
so good.
It really gets the adrenaline going, kind of going back to those spectacle scenes I mentioned before, and that sort of leads into the combat, which I want to settle in here with you for a moment on this point, because this is both a point of contention for I think a lot of fans and a point of like praise for the game as well. So here's what I'm talking about. this Final Fantasy 16 is an action combat game. It is not an RPG. It simply is not.
Yeah.
So whatever
Yeah.
expectations you have about it being an RPG, I think God of War, like the new God of War Ragnarok and stuff, that is more of an RPG than this game. I kid you
Yeah.
not.
Yeah. I noticed that when I was playing, I was like, man, there's like some the RPG elements in this game feel very thin to the point where I'm like, I kind of wish they weren't even in the game. Like, just lean heavily into the fact that you want to be Final Fantasy Devil May Cry, and I'd be okay with that.
Yeah.
Because I feel like some of this other stuff is just kind of like I honestly I ignore the skill tree. So I think that's what it's called, or ability tree, I think is what they call it. Because I'm just like, I don't really need this because I've got my moves that I really like, and I'm just rolling with it, you know. So I feel like the game almost doesn't need the RPG elements with what it's trying to do.
And I'm not sure how deep you are, Logan. Can you give me like a percentage maybe of how far you are? Are you past me? You think you said?
What can I say that will not be that won't be a spoiler for people? Let me just say this.
Well, I will say there's certain aspects about the combat that I think are spoilery in general. But anyway, I'm just trying to figure out sort of where you're at in the game.
I'll just say this: I have the ability to use long range electricity.
Okay, yeah, okay. So, at first the game starts and it feels like not great. It feels like a button masher. It's not. There's no depth to it, and you're like, okay, this feels good and controls good, but this is kind of boring. And they even give you like these like easy mode accessibility like rings and items to equip. That's like, dude, take that junk off immediately.
Really, dude. Okay, so here's the thing. Every time I see these kind of action games, Devil May Cry, whatever you want to call them, Bayonetta, whatever, I always see these videos. I'm like, man, they're doing some cool moves, and then I go into play. I'm like, I gotta memorize all these combos, and that ain't gonna happen. So okay, I guess I'm gonna stick to one single combo. Dude, as soon as I saw the ring that you can put on that just moves all the complex combos to the square button, I'm like, slap that bad boy on. Let me do all the moves. Let me feel like I'm awesome. And I gotta say, man, I told you this in a text. I was like, I'm happy with my grandpa mode that I've enabled.
I won't begrudge you on that one. They give you 3 of them at the beginning. They're like, this makes it easy. This one makes it easier, and this one makes it easiest.
So, yeah, it's just like turn on baby mode by putting on all 3.
Right. So it's sort of like they have difficulty baked in just with these items they give you. But anyway, what I'm trying to get at is the combat as you go through. It starts layering on itself, and it really blossoms into a great combat system.
Yeah.
Again, I won't get into all the reasons why and how, but it gets real thick real quick, and it's good.
It's funny because you mentioned, I've seen people say this online that they thought the combat was kind of boring, and I'm like, man, I never felt like that playing.
There again, I think people that are saying that are like in the first 5 to 10 hours, maybe. Yeah. And they haven't gotten to these layers that I'm talking about. And I think you know what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah.
But like that even continues more and more and more. So the combat is very much Devil May Cry like. It's very good if you're a fan of that genre and the action genre, those Bayonetta, Devil May Cry type games. It's a good entry in that combat, so to speak. But with that said, and I know we're going kind of long, or I'm going kind of long on it. I don't want to call out some bad things, some cons.
Okay.
This game has some of the lamest side quests I've ever seen.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I was gonna say if you don't bring this up, I will, dude. I will put this game on blast.
Yeah, no, I'm not above blasting this game. I love this game, but there's some things about it. They have 2 types of side quests. Basically, you can ignore these side quests, and this one has some good reward for its side quests, and you can tell based on the icon of the side quest.
Yeah.
So that kind of sucks. I mean, they are just. It is fetch quest as could be. It is like just skip this dialogue and get it done as could be.
And I was talking to some people when I was live streaming Cold Steel 2 the other day, and people were new. I had played it over the weekend. They were asking my thoughts on it, and we were kind of going over it. And I was telling them about the side quest, and they're like, "I wonder if that has anything to do with the fact that the majority of the people that worked on it worked on Final Fantasy 14, and so their kind of scope or whatever is just that. So the side quests are going to be your typical MMO fetch quests, boring stuff that you kind of do just to get your XP and move on. Nothing really serviceable. And I mean, that made sense, but it's still just, I'm like, I got to a point where ignored the side quests.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is so boring.
I can only think of one side quest, one of these boring quote unquote side quests that I actually remember. Like, it was, oh, that was actually pretty good as far as like the tale that it wove. But side quests are very lacking in this game. Like I said earlier, it kind of, it feels very linear, and the combat is very basic early on. So the first 5 to 10 hours or so you're gonna feel like, man, are they gonna kind of let me free? And they eventually do. But at first, it's very cutscene heavy at the beginning and just throughout the game. If you're not a fan of cutscenes, or Hideo Kojima's games, you might not like this, because there is a lot of movie watching straight up. So that's a thing. I mentioned the fact that there's no real RPG elements. In the last con I'll mention, and I don't know if this is a byproduct of the fact that the highs are so high, but it feels like a roller coaster as far as its pacing. There are some times where I'm like, this is the best video game I've ever played, and there are times where I'm like, I'm trying to keep my eyes open, I'm falling asleep. It's like, ooh, this is boring right now.
Yeah, man.
So the pacing is all over the place.
It's
and
bad.
There again, it may be because the highs feel so high, but whatever the case, it is what it is to me. I'm just like, it's totally worth playing, but I've got to get through this boring crap right here,
Man.
And not to say that like everything in between is boring. There's like exploring the world and getting into random encounters and kind of leveling up, quote unquote, is all fun. But there are just parts where you're like, man, I could not. I'm really dozing here. That kind of thing. So yeah.
Micah, I'm glad you brought that up, because as much as we've praised this game, the one thing that you just mentioned, with a couple other things added on top of it, is the reason why I actually deleted it off of my PlayStation.
Go off.
I'm like,
I know you've been feeling harsher about it than me.
I was like, I can't handle the roller coaster, but it's perfectly like you said. This game has some of the highest highs of any game I've played. When it is firing on all cylinders, you're like, oh my gosh, this is so dope. Oh my gosh. Things are popping off. The game looks great. You're fighting things, big things are happening, and big things are going down. I'm trying to be as, vague as I possibly can, but it's so stinking cool. There's some surprises as well.
Yeah.
But man, it's when you slow down, you come off those highs and you're down in the valley and you're like, oh crap, you want me to go deliver food to people around the hideaway? Really? Okay, governor, sure, cheerio. That bums me out. And I gotta say this, and I'm hesitant to say that this game is a bad game, because I don't really think it's a bad game. But it's kind of like what you said, that this game is more of an action game than it is an RPG. And you really feel that in that, sure, you technically have party members, but the way that you interact with them and how they get fleshed out isn't really what I'm looking for. When I play Trails of Cold Steel, like, I want to hang out with these characters. I want to get to know them. I want to know their backstories. I want to know kind of like what their hangups are. I want to see some character development. I want to get to know them a little bit, interact with them a little bit. But you don't really get that to, how do I word this? Like you get it, but it's just not, to me, it's just kind of not really what I expected. That being said, I'd really enjoyed, these characters. Sid especially, dude. Sid's dope.
Yes,
love this take on Sid, where he's not just kind of like the goofy engineer. He is macho, man. He is very suave, very debonair. You know what I'm saying? Golly, good looking dude. And
one of the better voice acted characters in the whole game.
Yes. And I like Clive. I know I've seen some discourse online where people don't really care for Clive. They relate him to Squall, and I'm like, well, I kind of like Squall too. So, it is what it is. Okay. But I like Clive. I like kind of, dude, the person who does his voice in the game does a really good job too. I like Clive quite a bit. Of course, I love Torgal, best boy in the game. You can pet the dog too. Great game. But yeah, it's really just a mixture of those high highs where you go into those low lows that I was like, man, I can't keep doing this back and forth thing. There's one point with the story, I'm not going to say anything, but it does something, and I'm like, whoa, hold up, wait a minute. Can we dial it back a little bit here? I feel like I missed something maybe. And just what else was I going to say? The combat isn't really an issue for me. That was my favorite thing. I was like, if you just let me fight things, cool. And actually, they kind of let you do that with one of the things in your hideaway. But
What was what you're going to say, Logan? What did it have to do with the lore and the story and following everything? It seemed like
oh
maybe
no,
that's where your brain was going. Oh,
no,
okay.
I love the lore thing. I love the fact that in game you
Okay.
can pause the
Yeah.
cutscene, pull up this giant encyclopedia, and double check. Like, okay, they said the bears. Let me pull those up. What are those again? Okay, they do this. You can
Yes.
be soldiers. You can like. I love that is all encapsulated in the game.
Okay.
Bungie finally did that with Destiny 2 years ago. But for the longest time, if you wanted the lore of that game, you had to go to a website. That's stupid. I love that everything in here is encapsulated in the game. When you have your slow moments, you can go take some time to talk to someone and share your information with them, and it expands the encyclopedia more. Love that. Never really felt lost in regards to like what's going on in the world, what faction is what. Love that stuff. Wish more games would have that. But I talk about off the air about what I'm talking about specifically.
Okay.
But so I love all that, but it's mainly just the back and forth stuff where it's just so slow. And I think what kind of hurts this game is that I'm playing this parallel to Trails of Cold Steel 2, where like, and I tweet this out, freaking awesome game. I'll get into it here in a little bit, but I'm enjoying it, and part of that is because I'm having those slow moments where I get to hang out with the characters, I get to spend time with them, I get to go do side quests, I get to keep up with NPCs that I'm seeing coming up again and again, kind of seeing what they're doing, and so I'm getting to feel like I'm in Erebonia in Trails of Cold Steel. When I'm there, I'm in there. I feel like I'm in an open
Yeah.
world.
In an RPG or in a traditional RPG, in a trail, whatever, I'm going to, Final Fantasy, they've had some titles in the series that have been kind of this quote unquote traditional army, and then they've slowly tried different things and
Yeah.
gone out and done a whole lot into where we are today, to where we have this straight up action game. And I
Mm-hmm.
think what we're missing, maybe what you're missing, is like when you go to the hideaway in Final Fantasy 16, you want to spend some time investing in maybe your 3 or 4 party members that you
Yeah.
would hopefully have at this point. Like, all right, so and so, we're going to get you a new this, we're going to upgrade that. Okay, so and
Mm-hmm.
so, we're going to go over here, we're going to get you this.
Yeah.
And you're spending your downtimes investing in your party members,
Yeah.
and there's
Well,
not really any of that going on. It's just like, yeah, there's some story going on, you do some side quests, maybe get you a better sword,
yeah.
but that's about it.
Well, I don't even find the NPCs all that interesting in this game either. One of the things I
Yeah.
have come to really appreciate about the Trails games is that, there's some characters that say stuff, NPCs you talk to, nothing really adds to it. But for a large majority of the times I'm talking to NPCs, if it makes the game feel more lived in. They're talking about the politics of the area. They're talking about how their family is dealing with it. And then when you go do a side quest and come back, they have different dialogue. So they're constantly growing
Mm-hmm.
in what they're saying, and so it just makes the game feel a little more lived in, a little more. What's the word when you get invested in a game? I can't think of what it is, but yeah, that's kind of what I want, and that's kind of the tension there for me with this game is that it's trying to do two different things. It's trying to be an action game and take this series in a new direction, which I can appreciate. They did this in Final Fantasy 15,
Mm-hmm.
which I was fine with. I played that and well, enjoyed parts of it. Some other parts I was like, wait, what? But they're also trying to maintain their legacy of RPG stuff. And I almost wish they would have just leaned more. And I said this earlier. I wish they would have leaned more into the action stuff and just kind of been like, you know what, this is a different style of Final Fantasy. You're not going to have the RPG stuff that you're used to because we want to focus more on this. Give it a shot, see what you think. And honestly, I think the action stuff is really, really good. I loved the combat. Really love the combat.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a good evolution of Final Fantasy VII Remake. But again, I think it's just not really what I'm looking for in a
Sure.
Final Fantasy type game. I don't mind the action combat. I don't mind the story per se. I just wish that the pacing was better. The structure of that was kind of laid out a little bit better. I wish the areas were a little more interesting to explore, and I wish the enemy variety was a little bit better. But they did do some really cool things with the enemies. The dragoons that you wind up going against at one point. Oh my gosh, this is one of the coolest renditions of Dragoons I've seen in the entire series, which again, they made them look dope in Final Fantasy 14. So of course they'll make them look cool here. But man, some of the enemy designs are really cool. Sometimes I'm just like, okay, I'm kind of tired of fighting spiders or or for the wasp or whatever they are.
Right. Yeah.
But it's just, for me, it's a mixed bag. There's things I really, really like. There's things I don't really like. And I just personally, I reached a point where I'm like, yeah, at least for now, I can't see me sticking with it. So I'm going to maybe put it on the shelf for a little bit. Maybe I'll come back to it. I mean, that's the thing with me. I put games down. I come back to them a year later. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing.
Yeah.
So maybe that'll happen with this game. I'll play it a little bit later in the year during the winter season when I typically play more JRPGs, and maybe my thoughts will change on it. But at least for right now, that's kind of where I'm at. Game is a bit of a mixed bag for me.
Yeah.
So
fair enough.
But yeah. But let's kind of round it out with Trails of Cold Steel 2. Like I said, game's dope. And Kokoro Daki writes in and says, Logan, please sell me on one of the Trails games. I'm going to give you two things. I'm going to say two things. The first one is this. This is a bit of a more cocky, kind of joking answer. But I have never steered any of you wrong when it comes to recommending games. I banged the drum for months on this podcast about Titanfall 2. Banged the drum for months, if not years, for Persona 4 Golden on this very podcast. I even banged the drum earlier this year for Dredge. And Kokoro Daki, I know you enjoyed Dredge. You didn't really enjoy the crab fishing part, but I know you enjoyed Dredge.
Logan, you were telling me to try out that Life of Black Tiger that one time, and that game didn't really work. I'm kidding. You don't even know what game I'm talking about. That terrible PSN game, that Life of Black Tiger.
How dare you insult Life of Black Tiger, good sir? How dare you?
You had this look on your face like you didn't even know what the game I was talking about was.
Let me tell you this, man. This might be a bit of a deep cut, but if you have not played Life of Black Tiger, you don't enjoy it. You have bad taste in games. And if you still haven't played Metal Gear Rising Revenge, you have bad taste in games.
Stop spreading lies right now.
But no, so that's a bit more of a cheeky answer. Let me just say this: here's why I've really come to appreciate this series, and I've said this on the streams. This series is kind of the bar that I'm going to be judging all other JRPGs by, simply because if you want really good world building in a JRPG, you want really good characters that change dynamically over the course of, several games, but even just the game that they're in, that you meet them in. If you want really good combat that, for those that maybe are more familiar with Final Fantasy VII and you really like the materia system, you got that in here. If you want really, mostly good side quests that track over the course of the series, you have characters constantly returning and changing, and some are causing problems, some are a joy to see again, and some you just love to hate. Excellent writing. If you want really lore-rich type games, definitely check these games out, man. You have, by the time this comes out on public feeds, Trails into Reverie will have released, which I won't be playing because I'm still in the Cold Steel series. But if you want all that and you don't mind going back to some of the older games and revisiting kind of the more retro aesthetic games, you can get past that to enjoy the top quality gameplay and top quality writing. You're in for a good time, man. I've really come to greatly enjoy and respect this series, especially when I learned that the team that makes these games is a team of I think 60 people. And I'm like, what the heck? Like, you guys are cranking out 100-hour JRPGs, and dude, hats off to y'all. And they have the story that just weaves into all the games. I mean, it's really good. The one thing that's a bit of a downside to this series is, where do you get in? What do you start with? And if you're on Steam, start with Trails in the Sky. Start at the beginning, work your way through. Granted, you got 9 games to play before you can get into Reverie. That's a lot to ask for. I understand that. So I guess that's 2 barriers, so to speak, you have to get over. And some of you that have played Trails from Zero know what I'm talking about when I say barriers. But so you have that. If you're on a console, unfortunately, you got to start from Trails from Zero. That's the 4th game in the series. I think it's an okay starting point. Some of the characters that show up, some of the plot threads that open up more in there, you're probably not going to appreciate as much as if you played the Sky games. So really, if you're on PC, you have Steam, maybe you have a Steam Deck, Sky is the best place to start. But if you're on console, you got to start from Zero. It's the only place you can start from, and that's kind of unfortunate. But Zero is still a good game in and of itself. The other hurdle you got to come across is that the first games in these series, Trails in the Sky first chapter, Trails from Zero, Trails of Cold Steel, they're slow burns. So if you don't mind the game taking its time, getting you invested in the world and the characters and the different places you visit, so you're better acclimated to that and you actually give a crap what's going on, you're going to enjoy it. If that doesn't sound like your cup of tea, you're not going to enjoy it. But I'm just saying, man, I'm 7 games deep, and holy crap, this. People were telling me this game is better than Persona, better than Final Fantasy, all that jazz. Yeah, it is. It's really, really good. Cold
Oh
Steel
man.
does some crazy things. I'm just saying, man. Y'all know how much I love Persona 4 Golden. I played that game 4 times to get the platinum trophy. Gosh, stupid Rize-chan. But it's really good, man. These are some of the best characters, some of the best writing in gaming that are out there, and I'm doing my job on YouTube, trying to put respect on this game's name, on the series, and trying to get more people to play it. So if that sounds like something you'd enjoy, you don't mind a little bit of a slow burn, and especially if you like Brandon Sanderson or One Piece, where it's the long form storytelling, just get into it and have fun.
On your next thumbnail, Logan, on YouTube, you need to have Persona crossed out, Final Fantasy crossed out, and then Trails of Cold Steel, big logo down there at the bottom.
I just might do. I almost did that with my review for Trails to Azure, like Persona who, like forget about it.
Yeah.
But I went with something a little more spicy that would kind of confuse people and upset people and make them click on the video, and it worked. So. But yeah, Trail series, don't sleep on them, man. They're really, really good. So like I said, I'll leave it at that. I've got reviews up as well for anybody listening on the YouTube channel. You can go check those out as well, and see for yourself. But the other things we're gonna kind of see for ourselves. I don't really have a good segue for this, but let's get into the news a little bit, because man, we've had a couple surprises, right? I'm sure people are probably sick of hearing about Xbox at this point, but there might be some people that are like tuning in even more now with the FTC getting involved and going that route there.
Well, Logan, we have some juicy tidbits coming out of the hearing, the preliminary injunction hearing for FTC versus Microsoft and all this rigmarole of them trying to acquire Activision Blizzard. And so what this has done is basically a lot of court documents have come out, a lot of poorly redacted court documents or otherwise have come out. And it reminds me, Logan, of when the Apple versus Epic case was going on a few years ago. And all this inside baseball from all these different companies that you wouldn't expect to hear about. Mm-hmm. And so what's happening, and we're a little bit late to the party, even on it's just been a slow news week. But when this episode goes live, that Monday, we might even have a verdict from the judge on if they're going to stop they're basically, okay, well, hold on, let me back up. What this hearing is for is to see if it's to see if they're going to do a preliminary injunction on Microsoft to say, like, hold on, you can't go through the deal, because they're trying to go ahead and just go through with it. Mm-hmm. And FTC saying, no, hold on, you got to wait. They're trying to get the judge to say, let's go to trial actually and see if they're being anti-competitive. And that's what this is about, to see if they're going to actually put a preliminary injunction on them going through with it. So we've got a smattering, and IGN has done a pretty good job of kind of summarizing all these random things that have just come out, just very bespoke stories, but juicy ones, I think, nonetheless. And so I'm going to start with this one. And again, these are just all kind of random, but we learned that Microsoft had intentions of purchasing a lot of other developers and a lot of other publishers outside of Bethesda and outside of Activision. So on this list, they were looking to acquire Bungie, Sega, Square Enix, Zynga. I've got a list of other smaller developers. Hold on. They were trying to get CD Projekt Red, Certain Affinity, Crytek, 4A Games, Digital Extremes, From Software, Gearbox, Hello Games, IO Interactive, People Can Fly, Remedy, Starbreeze, Techland, 505 Games as a publisher, and Focus Home Interactive as a publisher. They had just like a who's who list of independent developers and publishers that was on a watch list, I guess we'll call it. These were not like, yes, we have intentions of going forward and approaching all these companies about an acquisition. Yeah. But it was illuminating to me to see, like, wow, this is really the game Microsoft is playing. This is really, they have to feed the Game Pass beast. And how do you do this when games are starting to take 4 or 5 years to make, plus years to make? So, what are your thoughts on this little news bit right here, Logan?
I've got a few thoughts. I'm like, I mean, I would kind of expect them to have a watch list of studios to kind of keep an eye on, because of course, you have your Game Pass. You want to put some good games on there. You want people to subscribe to the service, and give them good value for their dollar. And I mean, it makes sense that they would have a list of people they're looking out for. They got some big names on there, but the one that made me laugh a little bit was seeing Bungie show up, and I'm like, really? you think Bungie is going to work with you again? Granted, they did have some of the Destiny expansions on Game Pass at one point, and they might still. But I'm like, man, that's like, dude, you guys burn that bridge. I can't see you acquiring them or them going for that. The other thing that makes me laugh a little bit is that Sonic could have been an Xbox mascot, man. Like, how wild would that be? Seeing it go over there, but I don't know. I can understand why they have this. But at the same time, I'm a little, what's the word? Kind of like, why? Like, no, don't buy more studios. Don't do that. I don't want. This is the thing that I'm kind of annoyed with, is just how it feels like since Xbox is doing this, Sony has to play ball, and then even maybe Nintendo will get into the ring at some point. But it's just like, I don't like these publishers or companies buying other studios up like this. I understand the reason for having a watch list. I get it. But just the idea of them buying up companies like Sega, Square Enix even, which, I mean, maybe they should have done that so they can get some Final Fantasy games on their platform. I get it. But at the same time, I'm like, let's not go down this road. Let's not do it. No. Especially after Redfall. Oh my gosh. But that's kind of my thoughts on that one.
Well, two other things that are sort of, I'll kind of lump these together, is this whole okay, so let me kind of back up, I guess, is the whole time Xbox has been like, woe is us, we're in third place, we can't get it done, all this kind of thing. And one of the headlines here is that the reason why Microsoft bought Bethesda is that it wasn't really, it was in the rumor mill. I think it's pretty well known now, if you kind of have your ear to the ground, is that Sony was about to do one of those classic kind of 1 year timed exclusive things with Starfield, like they had been doing with Ghostwire Tokyo and Deathloop with Bethesda. So they had been eyeing Starfield similarly. And I think once Microsoft got wind of that, they're like, okay, this can't happen. Like, we can't keep letting them punch us in the gut like this.
Right.
And so this is, I think, where a lot of Xbox fans are like, kind of like, yeah, like, Sony's playing dirty. We got to do something. We can't just let them do this. We're in third place, and they're the ones out here buying Final Fantasy and Starfield exclusivity. So, like, what are we supposed to do? And so they go off and buy Bethesda.
Corner, right? Yeah.
So what do you think about kind of that genesis of Starfield, Bethesda, and kind of that sort of being the moment where Microsoft went, Super Saiyan, and it's like, no, I'm going to fight back here,
Super Saiyan, man. I've never heard anybody call it Super Saiyan. Yeah, I mean, when you back them into a corner like that, I mean, they're going to resort to some different type of tactics that, I mean, quite frankly, PlayStation wasn't ready for. I got to be honest. This one here kind of irks me a little bit, just because of the discourse I've seen surrounding it. People, are praising Xbox for doing this and all that jazz. Like, yeah, eat it, Sony. But I'm sitting here like, weren't we all annoyed just a couple years ago when Xbox was doing this with Tomb Raider? Like, did we just forget that Xbox isn't above doing the same thing? Again, I get it. They're back to it in a corner here. They got to do something. But I mean, you don't have Sony going out here and buying these studios up and then siloing their games on the platform like what Xbox is doing. I think it's just that specific point is really weird, in my opinion, just because, I mean, sure, I guess you guys can say, probably people bring up like Bungie, but I mean, Destiny is still multi-platform. The upcoming marathon is going to be multi-platform. Sony isn't buying up random studios just to silo their games on PlayStation. Yeah. These are companies that they've worked with for years. And Xbox is just, I don't know, man. I get it. You got to do something. And,
I think they feel like they Xbox fans, they have a chip on their shoulder, and it's like, going back to that quote that Phil Spencer had in that really good Kind of Funny interview recently, where he said something like, PlayStation makes it really hard for us at Xbox to be successful, or something like that.
Well, they even echoed it here, just admitting that they lost the console wars.
Right, but just that, Sony's really aggressive with going out and doing these third-party deals,
Mm-hmm.
and while you'll get Deathloop, you're going to get it a year late, and all the
Yeah.
zeitgeist will be gone, and all that kind
Yeah.
of thing. So, it's for all intents and purposes, I'm going to use, Kane and Bridge of Spirits does feel like a PlayStation exclusive. I bet you Kane is going to come to Xbox in a little while, but it
Mm-hmm.
feels like a PlayStation exclusive.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So,
So
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So let me ask you this then. I mean, shouldn't these companies be doing this? I mean, if I was either one of these companies, I'd be trying to do what I can to make my platform more enticing to people. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I guess you could argue then too. Well, shouldn't Microsoft do what they're doing with buying companies? Like, what's
True.
wrong with them doing that versus the way Sony's doing it? It could be argued. And we've sort of gone over some of these points of why we think Microsoft gobbling up studios and publishers is a bad thing,
Mm-hmm.
and so on and so forth. But I thought that was just an interesting point that sort of kind of kickstarted the Bethesda acquisition and kind of kickstarted this whole mentality,
Yeah.
or a lot of it, into higher gear with Microsoft. I know they had aspirations to expand,
Mm-hmm.
but obviously the Bethesda one was like a big domino that fell.
Yeah.
Logan, I'm going to kick it to you. You're scrolling through this IGN
Yeah.
list. They got like a dozen or so headlines here. Which of these kind of jumped out to you, man?
Man, there's a few things on here. One of the things that kind of stuck out to me is this whole conversation surrounding exclusives. I'm even reading it here from the IGN article where Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella said that he has no love for console exclusives, and there's a longer quote to that, but it's not here in the article. But you guys can go read it in the article. Link. It says that Microsoft plays the exclusive game to stay competitive with market leaders, and then even Bobby Kotick, is it Kotick? I think it's Kotick. Bobby Kotick of Activision agreed, saying that making Call of Duty Xbox exclusive isn't in Activision's best interest and would actually be detrimental to business. So I read this and I'm thinking back to, when Phil said something about in that kind of funny interview, and I'm paraphrasing here, and I apologize if I butcher it, but he said something to the effect of, you can't just make good games and expect this all to just turn around. Things just don't work that way, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when I take that in combination with this, that they have no love for console exclusives, I'm left there kind of wondering, okay, so you don't believe that if you make a slew of good games, it would turn everything around. You guys don't love console exclusives. Then why are you buying up these studios and making those games exclusive and not even giving the option of Starfield, for example, to go to PlayStation then? That seems a little contradictory to me, and maybe someone can explain that for me a little bit better there. It just, to me, kind of reads as Phil Spencer just yet again speaking out of both sides of his mouth here. I'm left a little confused about this. It's you guys, either you don't like console exclusives, and if you don't like console exclusives, put your money where your mouth is. Make your games not exclusive. Put Forza on PlayStation. Put Halo on PlayStation, which might be their end goal. We've heard rumblings of Game Pass coming to PlayStation and Nintendo for the longest time, but Sony probably won't allow that because they're very prideful, but I understand why they wouldn't. And so I'm just left really confused. They say things like that, and I just don't really see a whole lot to back it up. I understand they got to do it to stay competitive, but you take that in combination with the fact that they admit, and really just this whole entire season of, or I guess saga of this acquisition, Xbox is just downplaying themselves left and right. Like we've lost, we haven't managed these things well and all that jazz. And I'm just like, then why are you guys even here to begin with? If you guys are doing this bad, why should you have something like Activision? Why should you even be in this space anymore? I get what you're doing. You're trying to tell FTC we need ABK in order to compete. But the other side of that is, why are you guys even still here then? I mean, you look at anybody in a business that's doing really bad, doing poorly consecutively, not meeting certain standards.
Yeah.
You're not gonna keep that job. You're
Yeah,
not going to be around. So I don't know, man.
Well, to answer your question, why are you even here then? I think, they obviously see a lot of potential in the
Sure.
gaming sector for growth.
Sure.
We're talking mobile is a lot of this. So, that is a lot of the play here for Activision Blizzard King is to get the mobile side of it and get
Right.
that rolling. And that is a lot of it. But I think, Satya Nadella saying he has no love for exclusives, for console exclusives. He has no love for that world. He was speaking to the fact, like he was saying, like, this is how Sony has defined the market and
Mm-hmm.
defined and sort of differentiated yourselves is with exclusives. He's saying this is Sony's fault and that I don't have any love for that world. That sort of was the premise for what he was saying, or the context for what he was saying there. But what
Mm-hmm.
Microsoft wants to do is they don't really want to create different games or anything. They just want to create a new model for which you get those games, the
Mm-hmm.
delivery mechanism. So in my opinion, they're not really, and they're, again, they have to have content to feed Game Pass, to feed that
Mm-hmm.
new mechanism. And as long as they have subscribers and they grow their numbers and they grow their revenue and they expand, then
Mm-hmm.
they don't care about anything else. They don't
Sure.
have that legacy of games are our core like Nintendo and Sony have. Um, because it's a fraction of their business at Microsoft. So they could kind of, I feel like they could care less about what happens to the biz, the traditional console biz.
Yeah.
Um, they're there to feed Game Pass, and they're trying to redefine the market based on subscriptions and
Mm-hmm.
subscription models. And that's like, okay, well, you've proven that you don't make quality games consistently. So why would anyone want you to kind of be the leader in this new market like that? Like,
Yeah.
in this new delivery mechanism. So, it's just, yeah, everything about this is just kind of like, I don't know. You go back to the Rise of the Tomb Raider thing and how everyone's doing it. It's like, yeah, everyone is doing it. So like, what's
Mm-hmm.
like, and like you said, you're literally buying companies to make games exclusive. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Like I said,
I'm not
I'm
going to
just
beat a dead
confused.
horse of like kind of the
Sure.
reasons why I think Microsoft's strategy right now is kind of a poor one.
Yeah.
But or one, not a poor one. It's a fine strategy. It's
It's
one that I
just,
think is detrimental to the traditional console games market. And if you
yeah.
value traditional, like single player console games, what Microsoft and Game Pass are doing are not going to help that.
Yeah. Yeah. You're not going to get Final Fantasy 16 with something like that.
Yeah.
Um, last thing I did want to point out was this here. People are like, "Oh my gosh, you're so harsh on Xbox." I want to kind of kick some rocks at Jim Ryan here for a second.
Sure. Let's do it.
I hate it when people are vague. It drove me nuts when I was in ministry. It just drives me nuts in general. But he said, that he talked to all the publishers and they unanimously do not like Game Pass because it is value destructive.
Mm.
And I'm like, okay, who did you talk to then? He didn't name any publishers, he didn't name any names, and that frustrates the crap out of me because I'm like, because to me, when I was a pastor and people would come to me and be like, hey, I talked with all these other people and they said this. I'm like, okay, who did you talk to? Let me go get that feedback from them and talk with them too. They're like, oh, well, it doesn't matter. I'm like, okay, so you didn't talk to people then. That stuff always drove me nuts. And when I read that here, man, it just, maybe I'm a little triggered because of past experience, but man, it really set me off because I want to know who we talked to. Because from my experience, or from not my experience, but from my perspective, I'm seeing the same developers or the same studios bringing more games to Game Pass. We just saw more Persona games coming to Game Pass. We're seeing those are the big ones I can think of at the moment, but I mean, we keep seeing more studios that Xbox doesn't own bringing more games to Game Pass. I'm curious to know who we talked to because I'm willing to bet Jim Ryan. Again, I might be a little harsher, but I'm willing to bet Jim Ryan was just lying through his teeth right there. I don't believe that at all because if that were true, then why are people bringing games to Game Pass still? You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, I think, well, a couple of things. I don't know if he's lying, being under oath. That'd be quite the thing to do.
Well,
Um, but but I think he was just speaking in generalities. Like,
Okay.
I'm just in the business. I talk to people all the time, and this is the general sentiment, I think, is kind
Sure.
of what he meant.
Sure.
But the thing I'll say is that, yeah, you see some repeats publishers on Game Pass, and
Mm-hmm.
there are a couple of exceptions, particularly Sega. Focus Home Interactive comes to mind.
Mm-hmm.
But by and large, what I think Jim Ryan means, what I think Strauss Zelnick means, and what I think Bobby Kotick means, when even the next day he was like, yeah, we would never put Call of Duty on Game Pass. That would be stupid. Is that big publishers aren't putting their big games on Game Pass.
Mm.
What you're seeing is like, okay, yeah, you got a lot. You look at this, like, Splash, all the publisher names, like, yeah, they all have a game on Game Pass
Mm-hmm.
because Capcom is releasing Exoprimal on Game Pass.
Hmm.
Games that need
Okay,
it.
fair enough.
Outriders from Square Enix, not Final Fantasy, not Resident Evil 4 from Capcom. It's Exoprimal.
Mm-hmm.
It's not Sonic Frontiers. It's like Persona 3 remake, from Sega. It's not their premier games. It's their games of service games, which need a platform like Game Pass, or it's their B tier games. It's never like, tell me the publisher that put their big AAA game on Game Pass, other than Focus Home, which is the one I already called out.
I mean, I'm looking at. I mean, isn't FIFA's? I mean, I don't play FIFA, so I don't know. But isn't FIFA a pretty big title? Because that's on there right now.
That's through EA Play, I
Oh,
think.
okay, okay.
Which is probably the old game anyway, I would imagine, but I could be wrong on that. But that's through their own subscription service.
Okay.
But like,
Okay.
I'm for real, like, I'll ask the audience, like, tell me a big publisher who has their big day one game on Game Pass, other than like a random one off who hasn't done it since. Like, I'll wait, because they don't exist. they just don't exist. That's what I'm talking about. That's what Jim Ryan talks about when he says publishers don't like Game Pass. Yeah, they like putting
Hmm.
their like iffy games like Exoprimal that they don't know if they'll have a return on Game Pass on there.
Hmm.
But why would they put Resident Evil 4 on Game Pass? They wouldn't, because it's stupid.
Hmm.
I think that's what Jim Ryan means.
Okay. Well, that makes it a little more clear then, so I can kind of back off Jim Ryan a little bit. Maybe saying that he was lying is a little bit too strong, but kind of just, I don't know. Again, like I said,
Yeah, no, it was
phrase triggers me.
a catch-all phrase that I think it could be triggering, because, like, okay, everyone, like, people don't like Game Pass. They just think it's a little risk averse,
Mm-hmm.
to put a game X and Y on there. So, they are picky with their catalogs. But the point I'm here to make, and I think what Jim Ryan, Strauss, all those guys are making, is that we're not putting our big games on Game Pass ever. Like that, why would we do that? We're going to lose a ton of money doing that. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what I've been saying, is that Microsoft is also losing a ton of money putting their Starfields and their Halos and everything just out there on Game Pass. And again, we talked about how Xbox gamers aren't buying games at the same rate. Yes, they still buy games. I know that, but
Mm-hmm.
not like they should. Not like they used to.
Yeah.
And why would they? So, that's kind of, I think, what we're talking about.
Okay. Okay. Fair enough. Well, that clears things up. From the other thing I did want to bring up, and I want to get your thoughts on this, was something you mentioned where Bobby Kotick even said that, yeah, we wouldn't put Call of Duty on Game Pass. That wouldn't work for us.
Right.
That was
It just,
surprising to me, because I'm like,
yeah,
huh.
the person
So
selling.
so why? I'm like, yeah. I mean, you're trying to sell your company here, and then you straight up say that putting it as what is it here? Don't agree with the idea of a multi-game subscription service as a business proposition going forwards, but we, Activision and Microsoft, can agree to disagree. That's really jarring.
That was after he said that quote was after the judge literally said, well, then why would you sell?
Yeah.
And he said something like, well, I'm on the board, I'm one of whatever people on the board, and the board decided to do it, and I have a fiduciary duty to do that. And then he said the quote about, yeah, I don't agree with it, blah, blah, blah. So basically he's like, yeah, like, that's Microsoft's problem, not mine, is basically what he said on the stand.
Golly, dude, that was
So,
wild.
the reason I have problems with it is because Microsoft has the money to just throw it in the fire, to just brute force this Game Pass stuff without any finesse or like care and knowledge for like the history of the industry and all sorts of things. So I mean, I know you guys are saying like, dude, you guys are harsh on Xbox, dude. Please prove it by start delivering good games. Please, your own good games that you didn't buy.
Yeah.
And then I'll hush. Like actually contribute to the industry through things other than the way you get your games, and actually produce the quality, the good quality games yourselves, like the substance there. So
yeah, fair enough, man. Well, Micah, I'll kick it to you, but I kind of want to get your thoughts on this too. This one kind of surprised me a little bit when I read this. And we've heard big AAA games are expensive. Cost for making them has gone up.
Oh man.
But man, we found out that Last of Us Part 2 cost $220 million to develop. Horizon Forbidden West cost $212 million. $212 million. Sorry, excuse me. That's a lot of money, man.
Yeah,
that's a lot. It makes you wonder, like, it makes you wonder a couple things, like, is this even sustainable? But it also makes you wonder, like, maybe if. Okay, I'm not going to kick Xbox any more than I already have, but I'll leave it there and get your thoughts.
Yeah, no, this is not too surprising. I would argue that they're even more if you count in marketing costs. I bet this $220 million doesn't count marketing costs for Sony.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had a feeling they were between $200 and $300 million to produce these big games like that. So yeah, that falls right in line. This goes back to what Sean Layden, the former head of PlayStation Studios, was saying about AAA games costs are becoming unsustainable, and the time it takes to make games are becoming unsustainable, and gamer expectations are becoming unsustainable, and so he was kind of reading the room a little bit, trying to warn everybody. And now, what does Jim Ryan, the new Sony head, come in and do and say, okay, we're going to make a bunch of games of service, live service games to supplant some of these big budget tentpole games. Making AAA games is expensive. Now, I know this is on kind of the higher end. I don't think games like, say, Resident Evil 4 Remake, I don't think they cost nearly this much. A Monster Hunter World, a Persona 6, even Final Fantasy 16, I don't think broke 200 million. I wouldn't bet. I wouldn't guess. Maybe it did. We'll see. But this is why when you look at games like Halo and Starfield, and they get put on Game Pass, and you're like, how are you making your money back, Microsoft? Like, just one of these things costs 200 million to make. So how is that? How is that math working out? It's the reason why we have, again, Sony's just producing these service games. It's the reason games are taking so long. There's all sorts of things going on here, but I guess I don't really have a whole lot to say other than making games is really hard. And for not that like every game deserves your attention, but just realize kind of what you're consuming. I'm playing Final Fantasy 16 right now, and like this is I talked about the big budget nature of the game, and you have to understand that we're going to get less and less and less of these games as time goes on. If you're a lover of the kind of big budget tentpole, big E3 trailer kind of game, we're just going to get fewer of those. They take 4, 5, 6, 7 years to make instead of 3 or 4 years to make. They cost 200 million instead of 50 million to make. And that's just like, think of the operation it takes to get all that done. All the team members, all the developers, all the programmers, all the producers and the audio guys and the art guys. And it's just such a big operation, man. So, I mean, this is why I like to buy games. And like, I don't mind paying $70 on day one for a game, even if like, it's not, I don't fall in love with it. It's like, yeah, not that you deserve that, but it's like, I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. I say, I value the fact that you spent 6 years to make this piece of art. And I'm going to say, yeah, even if it's not everything I hoped and loved, like I'm going to contribute to that. I'm going to support the industry, and hopefully we'll get more of these things. Because if Last of Us Part 3 cost $250 million to make, and it sells less than 10 million copies, we're not going to keep getting these games. Like,
yeah.
So
I was just thinking. What Last of Us Part 3 was made $250. You just get a JPEG that comes up on the screen. That's all you get. Just get a JPEG. You get
It's
yourself an
just a it's just
NFT.
a GIF. It's just a GIF of Ellie playing the guitar, looking sad.
Or trying to anyway.
Yeah. Oh, savage. Oh man.
Anyway, Micah, man, do we have any other thoughts on this? I feel like
No,
I've got my
we're beating
soapbox.
dead horses, I think. So let's move on to some write-ins, man.
Well, let's talk about this one real quick here before we get into
Oh,
the
okay.
write-ins about
Sure.
you know, the ongoing saga of Lord of the Ring Gollum. I know how to
yeah.
pronounce. I'm just being cheeky. Has come to a close with the studio ending all internal development of games, which means that other Lord of the Rings game they were working on is not going to see the light of day. Thank goodness, because I can't imagine what that would have been like. But instead, they're going to focus on just publishing games, man. Kind of a
Right.
crazy end of the story.
Yeah, this is Daedalic Studio, who has a long kind of history in games, and man, this is kind of what I'm talking about. Like, this is such a risk, and I know they're not a huge team. This isn't a AAA game, but it's like games cost a lot of money, and when you have a miss like Lord of the Rings Gollum, I think it's sitting at like in the 30s on the Metacritic score. It's like that's not cutting the mustard. Like they had to lay some people off, and they're closing development.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, just kind of, thoughts and prayers out to everyone who lost their job and is looking for a job. I think they're based out in Germany, is Daedalic.
Yep.
But yeah, just kind of sad story there. You never want games to turn out crappy like this. But yeah, rest in peace. Daedalic Studios is going to be no more.
Yeah, man. Callie, what a crazy man! What a ride that has been. Speaking of rides or riding, I don't know, man. I'm bad at segues this episode. Let's get into our Patreon write-ins. As always, you can support the show over on patreon.com/thereformedgamers. And when you do so, you can write into the show to get your stuff read on the air. Let's start things off with good old John Hannon. He writes in and says, Nintendo dominated the handheld gaming space forever, and then once the competition gave up, kind of eliminated the category altogether with the Switch. The rise of handheld gaming computers like the Steam Deck or ROG Ally, can a dedicated gaming handheld like the rumored new PSP succeed? Or would new hardware have to be multifunction in some way? Micah, I'm curious what your thoughts are on this, because I feel like this sort of thing still remains to be seen, right? Steam Deck is still pretty early on. The ROG Ally is still pretty early on. I think maybe it can, but it's still kind of early.
Yeah, I think maybe now with things like the Steam Deck and the Ally, I think we might have a steady stream of kind of just perpetual. There will always be some kind of PC handheld around. I kind of hope that's the case, at least. Some sort of offering, almost like like cheap gaming laptops, or like you can go find some. They're available. They exist. As far as like kind of more traditional console, like Nintendo handhelds, things like that, you kind of can't talk about it without talking about the next Nintendo console, or Switch, I guess, the Switch successor. Like, what is it going to be? Is it going to be Switch 2? Is it going to be something you can hook up to your TV and something you can be portable with?
Yeah.
That's the big question. If they have basically a Switch 2, I don't know what the need is, but I do think if any company can do it, Nintendo is that company. If they want to just re-enter the market again with their own dedicated handheld, they could do so. But the question is why? Like, they kind of sort of have their own dedicated handheld with the Switch Lite. That thing doesn't hook up to a TV.
Yeah.
So like in this world where you're kind of grouping them together, your games are going on this one thing that does handheld or home console TV stuff. Like, why would you need a dedicated handheld from Nintendo?
Yeah.
I don't see why you wouldn't need it. And I think they're the only of, Nintendo, Sony, Microsoft, of those three, they're the only ones who can really do it. I don't have faith that Sony can revive any sort of successful handheld.
Yeah.
So I think in the PC space, it'll continue on. And it depends on what Nintendo wants to do going forward. It's up to them.
One of my favorite movies, because I'm a huge Batman fan, is The Dark Knight. And there's a line that the Joker says where he's talking to Batman. Is like, you've changed things. There's no going back. And that's kind of what Nintendo's situation is here, man. It's like what you said in your write-in, John. They really change things. And I feel like it's early. I agree with Mike. I think we'll still see more Steam Deck stuff, ROG Ally stuff. I mean, as far as I know, the Steam Deck is selling really well. The Steam summer sale's going on right now, and you can get one, not for like dirt cheap or anything, but you can save some money on it and pick one up. I think we're going to see more of that stuff. I think we're going to see more innovations on that, upgrades and stuff like that. I think Steam Deck is probably here to stay, in my opinion. The ROG Ally, we hear things. Maybe we can get Adam on at some point to discuss his time with his and see what he thinks, because he's owned both. But I think with this, man, I don't really see a dedicated gaming handheld market being as robust as what it was with 3DS when that was around. But I don't know. Maybe. I mean, people do weird things in gaming all the time. You might see a new Ouya or whatever. I mean, people are trying stuff all the time, but you never know. But we shall see as time goes on. John, thank you for writing in. Boulder writes in and says, what video games or game have led you guys to the deepest theological discussions? Are there any particular moments that stood out as having a biblical parallel of sorts? And personally, when I was reading this, I kind of wanted to highlight a couple games here that we've definitely had some really good conversations on this particular podcast, and I'll link to those in your show notes so you can go check them out yourself. But some of the games that came to mind, Death Stranding, we had Matt Millsap on, and Henry Rigdon from the Discord server come on and discuss that game. I think I've talked about that game so much to the point where you guys are probably like, oh my gosh, he's about to go on a Death Stranding rant again. No, I'll spare you. But that was one. Final Fantasy IV is one of my favorite ones to go back to. I mean, you literally start the game. I'm not going to spoil it because the pixel remaster's out. Let me just say the main character has a perfect parallel to the Christian walk. Better than Pilgrim's Progress, in my opinion. Hot take. I know. I'll throw that out there. But that's one. Shin Megami Tensei 5 could literally be a class on World Religions in and of itself. Very, again, don't play it if it's going to bother your conscience, because it goes some really, well, it's not really borderline blasphemy, but I mean, it's very edgy. But you could literally talk about world religions on that one, and we had a good conversation on that with that game too. What Remains of Edith Finch was another one as well. We had Matt Millsap on to talk about that, along with some other folks as well. Those are the ones that kind of came to my mind. I'll have links to those in your show notes. You can go listen to those in case maybe you've missed them and you're a new listener. But man, I can't stop thinking about Final Fantasy IV, because just that game literally has the perfect parallel to someone coming to know Christ. And again, not saying Final Fantasy IV is an allegory for the Christian life. I don't think that's what they're intending. However, I think when you look at it and you see it, you're like, I think I see, I can see it. And plus, I mean, you have different things with certain characters going in there, falling from grace and being forgiven, and, grace and all that stuff at play. You have just temptation at play. Like Final Fantasy IV is probably one of the most Christian games I've ever played, without strictly being a Christian game. We like to joke and say Doom is a Christian game, but I think if we want to be more serious, I think Final Fantasy IV is literally one of the most Christian games you could probably play today. And the Pixel Remaster's out. I highly recommend it. Really good game. But Micah, is there any games that kind of come to you that maybe led to some good theological discussions with you and some friends, or maybe your family, or just stuff that kind of made you think a little bit like, oh man, there's some cool parallels here?
Well, I'm thinking back to some of the episodes, and of course I haven't been on the show that long, but I'm just thinking back to just some of my favorites. I feel like there was a good discussion, maybe not like, biblical parallel, but I feel like there was some good discussion around The Last of Us Part 2, that episode. I think Matt might have even been on that one as well.
Matt's been all the really best ones.
Well, he's got a really sharp brain. I love Matt.
Yeah.
So, he's always a go-to for some of these more deeper discussions. One personally that jumps out for me, I don't know how much we've sat down and talked about it on the show proper, but I know it exists on the YouTube channel. There's like a Why I Love Journey video out there.
Yeah.
And I've sort of made some corollaries of why that game reminds me of the Christian journey. And it's just like kind of a picture of just like life in general, just your walk through life. But from the Christian perspective, that game it could easily be viewed from the life of a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of my very favorite games of all time, and yeah, Journey comes to mind. I think Boulder. So yeah, that'd be one for me.
And that's kind of the cool things. I was playing Trails of Cold Steel 2 recently, and I even tweeted this out. One of the things that Reen says to one of the party members, they're inside of a church, and I mean, just to give context for it, I guess they're inside of a church. And one of the cool, dude, Trails is so good. One of the cool things they do in Trails is they have a very prominent religious aspect. Like the Septian Church is a big part of Trails. I'm pretty sure it's modeled after Catholicism, just because of some of the stuff I saw in the previous games. But regardless, Reen, and the main character Cold Steel, goes into a church with a character named Milliam. And she's a bit of a younger character, and they're talking about Sunday school. And she's like, "Oh, I've never been to Sunday school. What is that all about?" And he's like, "How, you've never been to Sunday school? Like literally every kid in the land of Zemuria goes to Sunday school growing up." She's like, "Well, I've never been. Can I go? I'm a little bit older than the kids there, but can I go?" And Reen says, "The church is a place for everyone. I don't think they're going to kick us out." And I remember playing that on stream, like, that is a really interesting statement. Of course, I tweeted it out and asked people, do you agree with this statement? And I don't know, man. Maybe we need to have a talk TRG about that. It probably won't last very long. It didn't last very long on Twitter like I thought it would, but people made some very good points right out of the gate. Yeah. Very wise and discerning folks. But I mean, that's one of the cool things, and maybe we need to get into that more on the show here, because that's something we used to do pretty frequently. I mean, the problem is we got to finish some of the games we're playing, and there's just so many games. It's hard to really pick what kind of game to do an episode on, especially this year, but that's one of the things. I mean, I want to encourage people. That's kind of one of the reasons why TRG even exists, is to reform the way that Christians interact with games, and even if you're not a Christian, reform the way that just people interact with games in general. And just kind of look out for those things, because you can see some of those things, and you might be like, "Well, I kind of agree with that. I do think to a degree, everyone's invited to church, but at the same time, you are called to come to Christ, to lay yourself, surrender, and walk in newness of life. Accept that." He died for your sins, and so you can walk in newness of life. That means there's change, right? But if you're going to come to church and cause problems, I'm kind of getting a little ahead of myself here. But that being said, I mean, that's something I want to encourage people. Keep an eye out when you're playing your games. Really kind of think through. Don't just turn off your brain unless you're playing Call of Duty. I don't think you can really draw any biblical parallels out of that. But definitely keep an eye on that. And if you're a new listener, go back to our back catalog. Check out some of these episodes here that we mentioned, and check out some other ones as well. A fun one. I got to sit down with Pastor Deuce and talk about the Doom series. That's a really fun conversation, talking about spiritual warfare. But yeah, I'm curious to know what some of y'all would say as well. That's one of the things I loved about being a youth pastor, was using video games to connect with students, and it's cool to do that. So Boulder, thank you for writing in, man. Appreciated that. What end things here with Dorian Taylor, kind of keeping things on the spiritual morality train. Dorian Taylor writes in and says, "Are there any games or types of games you tend to steer away from due to particular convictions? For example, some stay away from World of Warcraft because it basically takes over real life." Calling me out, Dorian. That's how my college years were. Or some let me restart that sentence. For example, some stay away from World of Warcraft because it basically takes over real life, or some, like myself, stay away from games with unavoidable sexual content. Man, I remember The Witcher 3 being a big point of discussion in the Facebook group for months because of that particular thing right there. But Micah, I'm curious, man, are there any games or types of games that you tend to steer away from for just any variety of reasons? I've got a few, but I want to hear from you.
Yeah, CD Projekt Red comes to mind because I've both Witcher 3 and Cyberpunk. Man, those were Cyberpunk especially, I think. Like, I'm thinking about back to the Facebook group, like some contentious threads.
Oh my gosh.
Back in those days. I know you're well aware. So those games come to mind, like sort of what Dorian says, like these like you gotta, not you gotta, but like these, like it's very encouraged to, like, romance, people, and things like that, and just getting into like sex scenes and stuff like that. I kind of, if there's a lot of that peppered through a game, or just a lot of nudity in general just peppered through an RPG like that, I'd probably not gonna get into it. There's like there's certain horror games, like the Outlast series comes to mind.
Yeah.
We're like, I love the horror genre, but there's some of them, and we spoke a little bit when we had Joe Thorne on about this topic. But there are certain just kind of lines that I won't cross in kind of, especially with like body horror and, like
Mm,
physical harm and things of certain
yeah.
things of this nature. I definitely, there's a line there for me. Um, but with all that said, most things fall squarely into whether it's a movie, a video game, or like this is fiction, and
Mm-hmm.
I can separate it from reality, and it's not that hard at all. And so I don't. There's not a whole lot, but I guess I don't know. There's so many games. It's really easy to avoid ones that might kind of rub up against your conscience wrong. Like you
Mm-hmm.
can just easily avoid them.
Yeah.
There's so many other good games out there. Like why even flirt with that?
Yeah.
So that would be my thing. Like for example, it was easy to say no to Cyberpunk 2077 when it launched. Well, not because of its performance in launch, but just because there is a ton of other stuff to play.
Right.
If there was nothing else to play, it would have been a lot harder. But
Yeah.
like, there's so many things you can play. Like, why would you even if you're like on the fence about that, or if you feel convicted at all about that, like, why would you flirt with that? Is kind of where
Yeah.
my brain lands on it. So yeah.
Yeah. No, man, I totally agree. I know for me personally, at least I can think of like two games actually that I honestly loved growing up. And that was Mortal Kombat and Grand Theft Auto. I have a really hard time playing those games nowadays. I can probably spend a couple minutes in Grand Theft Auto and just drive around, blow stuff up, have fun. But then there's like one thing that'll pop up. I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm done. Mortal Kombat is just too violent for me nowadays. When I watched that reveal trailer, I was like constantly like grimacing, like, oh my gosh, it's so gross. I'd love to play it just to see how mechanically solid it is, but I'm just like, I wouldn't be able to last in that. I tried to play the last two games, and I'm like, yeah, I didn't really last very long. I think
Yeah.
I did the career mode for 11, and then I was like, yeah, I'm done with this. So it's just those are really hard for me because they're just really graphic in a couple of ways. So it's just things like that. I honestly, when it comes to this show, I tend to play a lot of games that I probably shouldn't. Cyberpunk being one, but I didn't stick with it. But mainly just so I can kind of like speak from a point of reference where it's like I know what I'm talking about. I'm not just looking at a trailer and being like, oh, it's bad. I'm like, no, I played a little bit of it. Here's why I'm not going to keep playing it. So I tend to do that, and I know some people probably wouldn't agree with that, and I understand. I'm probably a
Mm-hmm.
little more loose with that than needs to be. But I will say this: I've been on a big JRPG kick for the last year, and I think those have done a really good job of kind of doing a sort of detox to where I'm realizing, man, I was desensitized to a lot of stuff. I tried to play Cyberpunk last year, and I'm like, nah, I can't do this, man. This is really rough. And just stuff like that. It's interesting to kind of see what happens when you play some of the more, I guess, family friendly sort of games. There's parts in the Trails games that aren't exactly family friendly. But I've just kind of tried to be a little more discerning with it. I don't
Mm-hmm.
really shy away from edgy type of games like Shin Megami Tensei, Hellblade, those kind of things. If you're going to tell a good story and make me think and engage the
Yeah.
subject matter really well, and I think both those games do a really good job. I would not recommend everybody play Shin Megami Tensei because it goes places that even I'm uncomfortable with, but it's a good discussion starter. Hellblade is a really great one for mental health and things like that, and fighting the darkness both spiritually and mentally. But I wouldn't recommend that to everybody either because
Right.
it's hard. It's hard to play. I'm not gonna lie. The last part of that
Mm-hmm.
game is really hard to play. Even Adam would tell you because I think he said it on the show here. But mainly stuff like that. I try to evaluate that, and I'm trying to get better about that because I really don't have time to play a lot of these games. But and I probably annoy people when I stream Cold Steel 2. There's things that come up and I'm like, I'm not comfortable streaming this. Let's skip the hot springs, guys. We're not doing this. And they're like, but it's so funny. I'm like, I don't care. I'm not going to sit through it. I'm not doing it. Plus, it's just like awkward. Everybody keeps bringing up the whole Reen needs his backwash sort of joke. Oh my gosh. Anyway, I've rambled on long enough, but I'll just say, like, especially after this year, there's so many better games to play that tell really good stories, have really great combat. If you need recommendations, let us know. But yeah, stuff where it's really graphic. Oh my gosh, Scorn was another one. I played that, so y'all don't have to.
Yeah.
Don't play that when it comes to PlayStation. That game was terrible and just gross. But stuff like that, sexual content stuff is a pretty big trigger for me. I gotta be honest, I don't even like watching movies where characters are just making out and doing all that stuff. I'm like, just go away. I don't need to see this. I don't need to see this. I don't need it. But yeah, I think I've rambled on long enough, but I hope that kind of helps clear some things up there. But yeah, I mean, that's funny because I mentioned that kind of ties in with your Reco, Micah, which leads to the end of the show. Dorian, thank you for writing in. Let's get into Recos for the show before we close out this episode of TRG. Micah, what are some things our listeners should check out?
Yeah, well, of course, we're all, if you're listening to this podcast, you're an avid video gamer, I would assume, or your spouse is forcing you to listen in the car or something like that. In which case, I apologize, spouse. But the thing I want to, so, we're so into the hobby. We love playing games, but I just want to encourage, we have, I think sometimes I've been talking about this with a coworker of mine. I think I talked about it a little bit with Nate McKeever, friend of the show, and just kind of, we're getting older and just kind of realizing, like, man, I'm talking to people who are like 4 years old when the Xbox 360 came out and things like that, who are like gamers now and adults and stuff and things of that nature.
I don't want to think about that. Oh man.
And so I have to check and say, we really, there's a lot of our audience that are just, young Christians, young, immature, men or women or whatever. And brothers, sisters, I'm here to tell you, check your gaming time at the door. Check your leisure time and make sure everything is in its proper place as far as priorities go. I'm here to tell you right now, if you're listening to this podcast and you're spending more time, or not more, or if you're like, gaming every day and not getting into scripture, for example, you need to check that. Get into scripture every day, multiple times a day. Like this is, that's just like a basic kind of thing, but I'm here to just kind of call you out, like check your gaming time. This can wait. There are responsible, husband, is your wife cared for? Father, are your kids where they need to be? Are you leading them in the right way? Are you having your daily devotions that you need to? And then maybe some gaming time at the end, when you need to decompress maybe, or whatever, everything in its proper place. So I'm not saying, you, me, or anyone else is doing anything wrong, but I'm just saying, brother, sister, check your heart, your heart, and make sure that the gaming time, your hobby time, pleasure time, leisure time, whatever, is in its proper place. And you have your priorities straight, and you have all those things kind of sorted out. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of call that out, because we don't, we're always talking about, Tears of the Kingdom, Final Fantasy, all these great games. How do you have time?
Yeah.
And you gotta check it. So you can't play everything.
Yeah.
And we all have responsibilities throughout the day. And yeah, just want to make sure that we're putting gaming in its proper place.
Yeah. No, man, that's good. It's funny. I was listening to you say that, and I was thinking back to how my parents would always say when I was growing up, there's more to life than video games. And I was kind of like bristled at it. But now that I'm older, I'm like, I think I understand what they were getting at better. And so it's I know people don't like hearing it, but it's something worth remembering. I know some people may look at us doing this podcast and doing streaming and YouTube content and stuff like that. But I mean, yeah, you guys may think I play games all the time, but y'all don't see me off stream when I'm taking care of my yard, cutting limbs, cutting the grass, doing all that stuff, and just taking care of things at home, spending time with my wife and all that jazz. So I mean, don't look at our podcast or the YouTube content and just assume we play games all the time, because we don't. You can check that out, and you guys are free to check my PlayStation profile too. You can see that for yourself as well. You'll probably see me playing a lot of Destiny, but that's a different story. My recos are this one. We haven't talked about board games in a while. on this podcast. And one of the ways that you can kind of spend time with those you love, friends, family, whoever it may be, is board games. We haven't talked about it in a while, and I got to shout out, former dear editor of this podcast, Skinner, hooked me up with the Resident Evil 2 board game a couple weeks ago. And we got it in. Me and my wife played it, and we're like, oh my gosh. Well, she doesn't know this because she hasn't played Resident Evil, but I'm sitting here playing it, and I'm like, this is just like playing the video game, but there's some extra mechanics here. This is really cool. There's different scenarios. So if you guys are looking for something to play, maybe take some friends, grab some friends, maybe grab some family members, and maybe not play Resident Evil 2, because as the insert will say, this game contains scenes of explicit violence and gore. No, it doesn't. It's just kind of a funny little gag thing. Maybe try that out. Maybe just go to your local game store and just see kind of what they got. Some other great board games that are easy to reco. Our Ticket to Ride is a good one. Clank is another fun one. But yeah, or even just ask the people working there. What are some of your favorite games to play for maybe a beginner? And just enjoy that. It's a great hobby. I need to get back into it more. When we were playing this, I was like, man, I miss this hobby. Good times. The other thing I want to highlight as well. My wife is a big Jurassic Park fan. Loves it, right? And she has been playing the Jurassic World Evolution 2 game that is free on PS Plus and just having a blast with it. There's some things she don't like about it. She's having a blast with it. I went in there the other day and saw like this park she had made, and she was like, "Here, let me show you some of the stuff I've got." Apparently, you can. Sorry, every time I say apparently, I think of that kid on the newscast like, and apparently I've never been, regardless. She was like, well, here, let me show you my park. And you can go into like the little rolly ball things and go through the parks as you made them and go into these little outlook things and see the dinosaurs and interact with them. I'm like, dadgum, this is like Roller Coaster Tycoon on steroids with dinosaurs. I'm digging this. So I need to get into it a little bit more. Man, it seems like a fun game if you got PS Plus. I would definitely recommend giving that game a shot, especially if you're a Jurassic Park fan. Man, it does some cool things. It's been fun to watch. But, Micah, we haven't done this in a while, man. Putting you on the spot. Any closing thoughts before we end the show? Just random thoughts that you may have.
No. I don't really have any closing thoughts. I'm still... I want to get back to Tears of the Kingdom. That's my closing thought. I was talking about the high highs and the low lows of Final Fantasy 16. When I was in those low lows, I was like, maybe I should go back to Tears right now. So that game is, I'm still thinking about it. So just kind of another testament to Tears of the Kingdom. But yeah, I guess that's my final thought. I don't know.
Yeah, man, fair enough. We talked about checking your gaming and leisure time and all that stuff. One of the things I want to recommend, another thing you can do, is watch some anime.
Ooh.
I've been thinking about One Piece a lot lately. I've been watching it a lot lately. Just got off the Little Island arc with, what was it, Bragi and... I can't remember the other giant's name. Really cool stuff, man. This is a really cool show. But again, One Piece isn't for everybody. But if you want to, kind of do something a little different, check out some anime, man. Attack on Titan apparently is going to finally finish after 10 plus years. Maybe that's worth checking out. But yeah, man, it's a good time to just kind of try some other things, and anime is a good time. But with that being said, y'all, thank you for listening to this episode of TRG. If you like what we do here, you can support us on a variety of ways. You can support us financially on Patreon and get yourself some early uncut access to all of our episodes and extra episodes of the show as well. You can also support us on YouTube in a variety of ways. You can become a member of the channel. You can super thanks. Just drop a little tip thing in the super thanks on the comments of this episode. You can like the video, share it, do all that stuff there. So maybe subscribe to the channel as well. Hang out in one of the live streams and have some fun watching me play Trails as well. You can also visit our website, thereformedgamers.com, for links to all of our shows, past episodes, and more, and check that out as well. You can follow us on Twitter. You can join the Discord server, and if there's anything else I'm forgetting, I'll post it in the show notes if I remember to do so. But with that being said, y'all, thank you again for listening to this episode of TRG. And until next time, be a tier, keep it locked here, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for listening to TRG. This show is fully supported over on patreon.com by our dear listeners. The following are our supporters at the producer level or higher, and we are thankful for their continued support that allows us to continue doing what we do here at TRG.
Those people are Mr. Butts, David Matthews, Richard Marroquin, and Alan Z. Thank you again for your continued support over on patreon.com, where you can pledge your support to the show and get early uncut access to all of our episodes, behind the scenes, and more. Thank you for listening, and until next time, be a deer, keep it locked here. We'll see you in the next episode.